Labdien! Šis ir raidījums Nākotnes kapitāls. Raidījums, kurā mēs ne tikai runājam par to, kā ieguldīt, bet paši arī to darām. Mani sauc Raivis Vilons, kopā ar mani ir Konstantīns Kuzikovs.
Sveicināt.
Un šodien mums pievienojas nacionālās aviokompānijas airBaltic vadītājs Mārtiņš Gauss. Hello!
Labdien!
Labdien! Taču pirms mēs sāksim iztaujāt par airBaltic biznesu, par biznesa plāniem, par Nākotnes IPO, par obligācijām, Konstantīns īsi pastāstīs, kā ir gājis mūsu portfeļiem.
Gāja interesanti, tāpēc, ka, ja mēs paskatīsimies uz Raiva portfeli, tad jau 21% bija drusciņi zem 20%, pēc tam atkal sāk augt. Viss pateiks kripto, kā es ieplēju.
Jā, tur nekas cits nenotiek.
Ja mēs paskatīsimies uz sebi roba investoru portfeli, tad ir neliels kritums salīdzinot ar to, kas bija agrāk, bet tas arī saistīts ar to, ka es tikko tagad investēju un attiecīgi bija pirkums par dārgāku cenu. Bija kritums līdz kaut kādam 13%, bet lēnāk iet uz augšu, un es domāju, ka atkal pēc pāris nedēļām es ieraudzīju 4 vai 5%. Kas labi par manu portfeli, jo es sāku apsteigt S&P 500 indeksu, un man jau tagad 8,9, man nekad nebija tik daudz. Un interesanti, cik ilgi es noturēšos, bet principā šo brīdi, manuprāt, ir pietiekami veiksmīgi. Kas vēl? Krāju obligācijas naudu es saņēmu, investēju tā saucamās dalītas obligācijas, un arī tur, principā, ienesīgums iet uz augšu.
Okay. Tagad mēs pārslēgsimies uz angļu valodu, un apakšā būs tulkojums latviešu valodā. Okay, Martin, now we can switch to English and start our conversation. So, the first question, I wanted to start with the general airBaltic financial performance, because the last official reports were quite positive. You had 33 million profit when compared to the previous year, and that was previous year was very hard, as I understand, and now the situation in general, not only for airBaltic, but general for aviation in Europe is improving. So what are the how is it looking now, the financial situation, and we will see the rise of the profits and general revenue, or what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, you're right. We had a record year last year. We had 28 years old, an airline. We never have gone through any bankruptcy or restructuring. We have always stayed as we are. State was always part of the shareholder. There were several times when the airline was in difficulties. The shareholders came in. But we never, like others, like SAS did Chapter 11, Norwegian did the bankruptcy. The neighboring states have lost, since I'm here, 5 airlines and trying. airBaltic is always here. And now airBaltic is larger than ever before and has made the largest profits. Not only revenue, EBITDA, EBIT, also the net result. And with the business model, which now works, we came out of the crisis, and we just now announced at least the traffic figures of the first quarter. And if you follow month by month, then it's again a new record in this first quarter in our history, with significant increase in the passenger numbers, in the revenue numbers, and later we will have the financial call for the first quarter. So the success story continues, as everywhere in Europe, but we have a past which is widely discussed, and we have to respect that, because we came out of a historic crisis which took a lot of investment. But the airline model itself, and numbers you look at, is EBITDA or EBIT, is highly profitable, and therefore it's a very good business. And at the moment it is growing, and our long-term business plan is to double the fleet from today's size. And then people say, where should all these airplanes go? Today already airBaltic makes 80% of its revenues outside the Baltic states. So we are the #1 exporter of Latvia, with last year 500 million euros just coming. That's half of the export of Latvia, and that was done by airBaltic. And a lot of people only see what we do locally, but the airline has become much bigger, and our growth will be here, but also in other countries, and therefore we will be continuing to grow. And of course, profitable growth, because we came out of 2 crises, COVID and then the war. The war is still impacting us, but we have offset it by flying more for others.
If you look historically, airBaltic was like a bridge between Western and Eastern countries. After the war came, and actually you have to change this positioning. At the same time, previous years, COVID came. And I noticed that, and in your report, there is also that you became more like starting to offer your airplanes to other airlines. What will be the future positioning of airBaltic? Because it's not anymore bridges. It's not like only regional, airline, but how you see this future, especially when we talk about potential EPO, what you could offer, what vision of future airBaltic will be, what will be a positioning?
Yeah, you're right. We were an airline which was serving Riga as a hub,
Yep.
and 50% of the passengers, so half, were transferring. Today, the transfer is still here. We are still operating Riga as a hub and will do so in the future, but the transfer share has reduced to 35%. So it became more, 65% today is so-called point-to-point traffic from Riga. But what also changed was we are today also the largest airline in Estonia from zero. So today we are the market leader in Estonia with 27% market share. We took this market share from our competitor Ryanair, similar to here. We also grew in market share in Riga in the last 2 years. And we are the number 3 carrier in Lithuania now. With the connectivity index, we are number 1 carrier there. So, which means airBaltic has completely developed, has grown here in Riga. Despite the war and despite losing all the east-west connectivity, we still have a north-south, Scandinavia, Balkan, Germany, France. So we still fly this connectivity via Riga, but we have developed the whole of the Baltics, and we are the market leader in the Baltic states. airBaltic is the largest airline in the Baltic states, and very important also today for Estonia and Lithuania. But the need after COVID was over and the war came was we had too many aircraft at the beginning of that crisis. And rather than grounding these aircraft, we found a way of giving them to other airlines for good money. And this business model has been so successful that today airBaltic developed to be the premium carrier for this kind of business. There's nobody offering the service of airBaltic for other airlines. And this business is something we then develop further. And if you look at the long-term perspective, we say that when we have 100 aircraft in 2029, that's the current order book, we will have around 30 aircraft, so 30% flying in this business segment, which is a different segment, but it's still done by our aircraft, our crew. But 70 aircraft are flying then in the system which we have today. And this is how we go forward. And this also explains our profitability, because that kind of business is a very profitable business. And the mix between what we do well, connecting the Baltic states and that business, that delivers these good results.
But is it a risk that airBaltic became like a SAS? Because Scandinavian Airlines, that was historically built between Sweden and Denmark and became like regional airlines. Actually, airBaltic started to copy that. But if you look right now, you're number 1 in Latvia, number 1 in Estonia, number 1 in Lithuania. Is this market not so small for future perspective? Is there a risk that we will airBaltic became a SAS?
So we are today around 55% market share, which means 45% is still other airlines in Riga. In Estonia, we are 27% market share. So 63% is other airlines, and in Lithuania, it's even more. So and that is without growth. So we could still take market share. But we have also opened Tampere in Finland, the largest city. And for the winter, we have opened Gran Canaria as a base, basing 2 aircraft there and flying into the Nordic states. We will expand here, but not all aircraft will be in the Baltics, which means our model, having a full-service business class and having an economy which is competing with low-costers, is a unique model in Europe. Nobody does that. We also have 23 co-chair partners. All the global airlines are flying with us. It's Lufthansa, KLM, Air France, Emirates, Turkish, British Airways, and many more. We have a very unique model, which is identified by investors, that is something which Europe doesn't have. And therefore, we have this success story as airBaltic. It's not only what people see, what we do in Latvia. airBaltic has developed into a brand which has a different portfolio and has no limitation on growth as long as you continue on this success path which we have today. And then people come back and say, but you lost money in the past. Yes, like any other airline, lost money in COVID, huge amounts, and all these airlines needed help from their shareholders all over the world. And what I sometimes miss is to look at it this way and exclude these years from investments and exclude these years just for a moment and then look at the performance of airBaltic. It has been very, very successful. And even now, if we don't look back and we just say, where are we now? We just reported record figures on all levels. And now the question is, how do we go forward? do we get the trust of investors, of the shareholder, to grow a successful model further, where international investors say, yes, this is an airline we believe in. At least this is what we hear today, and that is what we are advertising. And I think we have to differentiate between the business community, which understands numbers and dynamic at capital markets, and then a local misperception that we are using taxpayers' money, because the airline has a total investment of the taxpayer of the state in 28 years of 543 million. This was the amount of money in 28 years put into the airline, including the COVID time. Yeah. And if we just look at only the taxes the airline and interest the airline has paid back over these years, that is around 400 million already. So if you say net, and this is just cash forwards and backwards, but what we are doing every day is we are delivering for the GDP of Latvia, for the connectivity, the hotels, the jobs, the mail transportation. Today we have a lot of military transport which happens on our aircraft. The families and the soldiers, they're coming on scheduled airlines. All the mail, all the Amazon, the small packages and the letters, they're all coming on airBaltic aircraft. There's no railway going to Europe. How do you get to Europe if you're not flying? And that connectivity has an impact to the economy, even to the buildings here, even to any business which is done. airBaltic has been here for 28 years undisrupted. And I think looking at the neighboring states losing their airlines and the impact to it, this is not looked at. And of course, us now going forward and growing further, I understand the question. So will the state forever has to pay it? No, because the state says, we have now a successful brand and we take it to the stock exchange. That is the idea, to strengthen airBaltic. We get new money, plus the other companies the state could also take to the stock exchange. And that is actually a good story for Latvia going forward.
In this studio, we often with Rāvis are talking about that Estonians are ahead of Latvians and Lithuanians. And very often we say, okay, what we have to do to reach Estonian level. You're saying that you're number one in Estonia. What Estonians did wrong? That they lost almost 2 airlines, and you managed to earn this market, to become number one there.
It's not me to say what they did wrong, because I think they are very...
In your sector, at least.
Yeah, in my sector, we have been the most successful airline in the last 10 years since I'm here in the Baltic states. And I would take the credit that it's the management team and us, together with our shareholders, to taking always the decision to continue the business, analyzing it and continuing. And it's not, it hasn't been paid to be around, because everybody had the chance in the COVID time to go to their shareholders and get a bridge. Yeah. I think we have a successful business model, and this is why we're here today. We just have the better business model. And we go forward, and I'm sorry for others losing their airlines, but we stepped in and we grew very slowly also in other markets. Mm-hmm. We didn't do a crazy growth by going and putting many aircraft there. And don't forget, airBaltic is competing in an area in the Baltics which is from a GDP per capita significantly lower than the rest of Europe. But we're doing a very successful job as an airline, as a European airline, and we are taking market share and competing with the best airlines in Europe, Ryanair and Wizz Air. Very strong airlines. The largest airline actually passenger-wise is Ryanair, a very profitable airline with a lot of money. airBaltic successfully competes in all markets with the best in class, coming from a home base, from an area where the purchase power is the lowest if we compare to Central European markets. So I think analyzing it, we must have done a very good job in the last years.
It seems so.
Okay. Yeah. But still we need to talk. You already mentioned the IPO and in general success of airBaltic, and that is true that in the last years a lot of companies have gained money from either their government investors or private investors and so on and so forth. But we must talk about your bond issue, the bond refinancing, because that is the first step before you can actually reach the IPO. So to remind our viewers, in 2019 you emitted bonds with the 200 million amount to finance the company and finance the growth. So now it's this year, this summer, you have to give back those 200 million to investors. And there have been a lot of talks from airBaltic as well in every public forum where airBaltic, either you or your colleagues participate, you always talked about, and there was, and maybe still is, this unknown thing about that. Will you get that money from private investors, or government will have to step in and finance it? So what can you say about that now? What is the plan? Can you reveal something?
As we are regulated with the bond, I'm limited of what I can say to the process, but I can say what was stated publicly and is public news. We don't have to pay back the 200 million normally. Technically, yes, but normally you refinance a bond. So normally bonds are refinanced. So we talk about how we refinance the bond. There's several options. There's the public bond process. There's a private track where you could find just one investor who does this. And we stated that also in our annual report. There is also the chance for the shareholders to participate. But to participate means like private investors, not the state as taxpayers' money. And I think this is the discussion. On the actual process, we said we would give guidance with our first quarter results, which is in May, 22nd of May. By that time, we will formally say something, because whatever I say might be moving the current bond price, and I'm not allowed to, because of financial regulations, to disclose what is the process. But yes, we are in a process to refinance that bond. We're looking at different tracks, and it is correct that the state and our private shareholders are allowed, if this is such a track, to co-invest under the same terms, which means if you have, today we have 200 million from private investors all over the world. They have invested in airBaltic and they get interest payments. Of course, the Latvian state did not invest as a shareholder at that time, but if the Latvian state would invest in the future bond, then the Latvian state would get that interest. So this is not taxpayers' money. This means the state would receive money which it can use. It's a profit to do other things. Because let's say we refinance the bond 100%, 200 million, with a new bond. This interest payment goes to international investors. It comes from our profit, and because we pay interest, and we pay more interest because the interest has changed to the 6.75%, that means this money goes to international investors. If you have our shareholders, and I'm talking about the private shareholder and the state, and they would want to invest, then these profits would go to them in the same way. And I think this is the debate, also the public debate. If you ask me on the concrete status, then I have to say we have to wait for the announcements which we officially make, because I can't disclose details of the transaction.
Is there a chance that I could buy in future bonds on Baltic Stock Exchange? Or you will have to stay in Frankfurt on much bigger stock exchanges?
If we talk about the bond, then the current instrument is an instrument which normally is bought by institutional investors, because one bond today is 100,000. If you have the license through your bank to buy yourself such a bond, which is traded in Dublin, then of course you could. But if you talk about the IPO and being shareholder, then it's our target to have the public, because of the strong brand we have, to be investors. Similar to Biržā, which went to the local stock exchange. airBaltic will go to the local stock exchange, Nasdaq, and potentially internationally. But priority is the local capital markets for us, so that we have not only international investors, but also local investors. And then it's a simple share, which of course everybody could buy.
Well, we will get to the IPO process as well, but I wanted to still talk a little bit about the bonds, but I completely understand that you are limited by law, what you can say and what you can talk about. But I just wanted to clarify to our viewers that recently, a couple of days ago, our national parliament approved of the plan that our government could buy out bonds or invest in public traded companies or governmental companies and such. And so, of course, there have been talks that it has been done to invest in airBaltic when the time comes. But I understand you can't comment on that for now.
No, but I followed the discussion, and I think in our process, the process we are in, highlighted the issue that the state could not participate in this. While it is a very good instrument because you are earning interest together with the largest international funds in the world, they can earn money while the state cannot. And so therefore it's still a decision of the state what they do. But I think that is a good change in law. And I think that's why it also got a large majority, because the ability for the state to take an action in the private capital markets is a good one.
Mm. Well, in your opinion, would that improve the foreign investors' view on airBaltic bonds? Because last year and even 2 years ago, we saw that the bonds were sold off with a discount in the public markets. And for me, actually, that seemed a bit strange because, well, it is no secret that, as you said also, the government has helped the airline multiple times, and it is our national aviation airline, it is a regional airline. So for me it looked a bit strange that foreign investors do not believe that if something happens that government will help airBaltics. I understand that you can't talk about that, but in general, does this new law improve the possible view of foreign investors on your bonds?
Maybe not on our bonds, but how they see Latvia as a place to invest. I think any change in any improvement in the capital markets, and that's why we should go to the stock exchange, will help. So any law which allows the state to participate and strengthen the local capital markets will definitely help from an international perspective. You addressed the issue that the bond dropped to 60, now we're at 95 again. That was mainly driven by COVID and the fear of investors that the airline would disappear. And again, they were wrong. So the people who sold at the time were proven wrong because the Latvian state has demonstrated, and there's reasons for it, to maintain its airline, like many other states did, because it's a good business. And the state as a shareholder, together with our minority shareholder, are the shareholders. Like in Lufthansa, the shareholders are also there when the airline needs them, and then state came in. Shareholders, yeah, it's not different whether it's the state or it's private shareholders, have to evaluate what is that business for me? What is the value of the business? Mm-hmm. And for the Latvian state, we talk about a 2.5% GDP of Latvia impact of the aviation sector. Mm-hmm. If you look at the numbers, they are so big that each year the existence of airBaltic pays off automatically just because of our existence. Mm-hmm. If we on top of it give the chance to earn profits, then it's even better. So if you zoom out and you look at this airline and then you look at who is the shareholders today, the Latvian state, and you analyze the direct impact, all the knock-on impacts, we're responsible for more than 30,000 jobs in Latvia. 30,000 jobs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you look at that dimension, we last year carried 6.9 million passengers with our aircraft, also some for other airlines. Look at the population of Latvia and then look at that size. And if we look at the amount of flights we do in and out of Riga, and you look at the potential of people coming to Latvia, just the potential, while the hotels are not full, while everybody says the tourism is not going and not going, it's definitely not airBaltic because we have reached old strength, right? But just take us out. What would be the consequences? And I think this is more and more understood from the public, that the state is a shareholder and acts also like if it would be a private shareholder, looking at it and saying, it brings me a huge benefit. And that benefit cannot only be measured in the money you invested once. Yeah? Again, 28 years and an investment of 543 million, including 340 million in the COVID time, which is a time where we saw worldwide airlines go out of business. So if people analyze it, break it down, look at the last 10 years and what has happened, we have the most modern fleet in the world if you look at the category of aircraft we have. Mm-hmm. We are technology-wise well ahead of others. We have been the first in so many fields. Yeah? We were the first accepting Bitcoin in 2014 when people didn't know what it is. We will be the first airline in Europe having Starlink SpaceX on board. So this small, not so small anymore, Latvian national carrier is making global headlines and is profitable now. But we had to get there. We had to get out of COVID, and we had a war and still have a war next door.
This is a very good sales speech. But if you look at money, what you need or EPO, it will be international. Because it's very often when you look at company like Apple or Microsoft or big chips, we see that, okay, they're growing, but they're growing so fast. And they, for example, everyone expected growth by 5.6%, they grew by 5.4%, and their shares started to drop. Yeah. So when we're talking about bonds, for example, from business perspective, airBaltic in okay situation, it's even better and better. But these international investors who are looking that, hey, airBaltic, it's where? In Latvia, Latvia next border to Russia. Russia is very unknown factor. All this why we will not be so, maybe we will not think about airBaltic like a good investment. So how do you see these risks from international investors? Do they become smaller because of 2 years of war, or are they still so high? Because of course we would like to support airBaltic because it's we're proud of being airBaltic in Latvia, but at the same time you need hundreds of millions. EPO will be like maybe $500 million, and you can't get such money from Baltic market. You need to go to international markets, and in that international market everyone will look first of all on the map. What will be your message to these international investors, and how you could mitigate such risks?
You're absolutely right. That is the number one item we hear. Yeah. We were in US recently, and that is what you hear. Aren't you there where the war is, right? Mm-hmm. So Latvia has this big disadvantage of being seen as like a war zone, while it is not. So our argument is, first of all, saying where is Latvia? That is one of the big issues, right? Where exactly is it? It's not in the war zone. It is, and then comes a very important argument, and I think the government has done, all the Baltic states governments have done an incredibly good job to highlight that this is NATO country and it is an EU country. And these arguments help over time, right? And education helps. But of course, an educated investor can differentiate between a NATO country, which is a member state of the EU, and with that having all this protection, than a country which is not in the EU and not a NATO member. So, but it is an education, and you're right, this today is one of the biggest issues. Yeah, I think we would not have that discussion if we would be sitting in Portugal. Yeah. Not at all. But we are where we are, and we have to live with all these issues on top of our day-to-day issues. And it's not nice. We have to fly around all these countries to the east because we can't overfly Ukraine, we can't overfly Russia. We have many disadvantages, while competitors who come from there, they can just fly through Russia. Yeah. There's many little things where people say, you have a disadvantage. It's correct, but look where we are. We reached, despite the war going on for 2 years, record results. And I would turn it around and have this national pride to say, look at us. Yeah, we have done a bigger success than ever before, and our annual reports are analyzed, so people are digging into it. Yeah, but I can't talk away the geopolitical impact, and I can't talk away COVID and 2 years of war. It's there, and to address this, if we do an IPO, yeah, which is still an if, but we want to do an IPO, and it's a very clear path. So we do the bond, we do the IPO. If we do the IPO, this is exactly convincing international investors. The good thing is there's also investors which are not only in the US, there's also German investors and French investors and UK investors, and they all know where Latvia is, believe me. So we have hope, but yeah, it's a big issue. The geopolitical location where we are in and the media reporting in the West is also about that there's all the time trouble. Yeah. While there's no trouble, we are absolutely safe here because we are a NATO country.
From your talks, do you see that this risk for last 2 years became smaller? Or it's on the same level like it was in 2022 when the war started?
I think the statements NATO made, the efforts the Baltic governments did has reduced this perception and has also made it very clear where we are. Yeah? Okay. And we are in Europe and we are a NATO country with all the strengths of NATO, and therefore I see it has gone down, but it hasn't disappeared. Also because of the rhetoric coming from Russia again and again, right? And a US investor reading something that, yeah, Russia goes to Latvia, we look at it and say, I better don't, right? And that is where we are saying, no, this is propaganda. We are a good company, we're making good numbers, we are flying from Riga all to the west, it's all fine.
Yeah, so I heard you said if about the IPO. Previously, in previous presentations, I felt that it was more determined, like Vitāls Zālītis talked about it, you talked about in presentations, and there was a bit more determination like at the beginning of this year and at the end of the last year. What has changed and what are the if factors? And does that mean that the IPO is put on ice for in a long time, or maybe we will see it like, if not this year, then I don't know, January 2025? What are the factors?
So first of all, when we hired international advisors for the IPO last year, we made one press release, and all the lawyers said we can say is we hired them for a potential IPO in the second half of 2024. Mm-hmm. We, since that time, shouldn't have said any other sentence. Today, we are discussing IPO every day in the media, everybody, as if we have decided to do it. That is very unusual, because normal IPO process is that you announce that you want to do an IPO once you have taken the decision. Where are we? Since last year, November, we're going full speed in the preparation for a potential IPO. So the dynamic hasn't changed, it's actually increasing. And a lot of work we are doing for the bond refinancing is already work which we need for the IPO. The good numbers which we are reporting, that is all for the IPO. But you're right, we are focusing first on the refinancing of the bond, and then we are full steam into the IPO. The IPO itself is a complete separate process to the bond process, and therefore we are in this first, and then we go for IPO. The final decision to go for an IPO will be earliest taken in the second half of this year, and then we are in the full mode of IPO with all the public. But normally you would not hear all the discussion we had since November about IPO, because that is not normal. But I understand a huge public interest, and we try to satisfy it. But from a legal point of view, I cannot tell you anything about that process, because once you are in an official process, then you officially announce we're doing IPO. But give us the time to the second half of this year that we can make that statement if we do it, or if we do it in 2025, yeah. But the plan is to list airBaltic at the local stock exchange.
Dual listing, right? Partly.
So that also is a decision to be taken at that time, but for sure it's local NASDAQ. That's our priority. It is our priority as we are the largest brand and the best known brand of the Baltic states. We are the icon, that we have a leading role in such a process, and then other companies to follow, because a successful placement of airBaltic at a stock exchange, at any, but especially here, would of course have a knock-on effect of other companies. Yeah. But and again, we are talking here also to educated investors. They need to know an IPO announcement is an IPO announcement when you do it, and that we haven't done. We are talking, and that's why the wording is and I have to be like this, potentially. The first announcement could happen in the second half of this year. This is what we keep saying, yeah, because that is the language I have to use in this process.
But maybe all this buzz about your IPO is very good for you, because it means only one thing: a lot of people want to become your shareholders.
I hope, yeah, and I think it is not bad that there is a lot of advertising for it, but just imagine the advertising when we really do it. This city is going to be completely green. Yeah, you will see it everywhere.
Maybe you shouldn't, because there will be a lot of people who are already waiting for that.
No, and of course we want to combine things that our passengers see that, and that that Latvians become investors in this airline, and passengers see this as a positive move. We have a lot of ideas of what to do, but we are not in this phase now. Okay. So you cannot miss it once it starts.
Okay, please promise that you will do this announcement in this studio.
I doubt it, because also that has to be done in a different legal form.
But okay, but still, I understand that going back to the bonds, but you are looking at the signals from the bond refinancing as well as a potential decision for IPO, because of course if it's hard to find investors who are interested now in the bonds, then possibly there are not that great signals for IPO as well, right? You are looking at this process, and also one last question. Previously airBaltic has stated that you want not only refinance the bonds 200 million, but also gain 100 million for growth. Is that right? What will you use that money for? What are the goals? Buying new airplanes,
yes.
ordering?
So we have already signed up for 50 more aircraft, or 30 plus 20. It's for the capex, what airBaltic needs in its business plan to achieve the larger results. Yeah? So we have a growth plan, and that additional capital is for future growth.
Yeah, and so the final part, you already mentioned that airBaltic started to use Bitcoin, take Bitcoin as a payment in 2014. Then you were very successful with your NFT program, actually, because I have talked with private airBaltic plane owners who are very satisfied with the program. What has been the gain for airBaltic from it?
It's actually a huge success. So Bitcoin, or in general cryptocurrencies, as a form of payment, adopting it so early had a PR effect, but it also had a positive effect because people who paid with cryptocurrency, we don't keep this. We can't keep the cryptocurrency. We couldn't keep the Bitcoins all these years, otherwise we would probably be in a good position today. But for legal reasons...
You would not have problems with refinancing bonds.
Yes, but no, how it happens, you pay with crypto, and then a payment provider is exchanging in the same moment to euro, and we get the euros. But we accept it as a form of payment, and therefore many people who like to pay can pay like this. The NFT is a completely different technology. We were the first airline in the world issuing an NFT program, first a marketing program, which is, I think, nearly forgotten, but there will be coming something about it later, because we had the cities, the 12 most beloved Latvian cities, as an NFT, which is still traded on OpenSea. But then we came with the idea, how can we integrate the blockchain technology with our frequent flyer program? And that has been a huge success, as you say. Planies have delivered to us, depending on the ETH price, because they're traded in ETH, up to $1.7 million so far in income for the airline. And there's a planie holder, somebody who holds that NFT, is, if he's a member of our frequent flyer program, statistically flies much more on us, so makes more revenue with airBaltic than a non-planie holder. So the identification with the program shows us that that is what some customers want. And our frequent flyer program has also grown because of this. So we have today close to 1.2 million members in this frequent flyer program, which is internationally seen as a big success. So I'm invited even to speak in the US about the planie success as a technology coming from an airline and its frequent flyer program. But at the end of the day, it is also a financial success for us and the planie holders, because the planie holders get every day, without flying, frequent flyer points, which give them after 1 year a free flight. Yeah? If you don't do anything, but you own one of these, then you get a free flight. So there's also a utility, and I think that is what the industry likes. We go for technology, which is not fake, which is not a scam, as people say. There's a real value behind it. And when you talk to planie holders, that's what they tell you. They say, I have a real value as I have invested in this NFT, which is part of our frequent flyer program.
Yeah, I mean, you found the real value. You invented the real value, yes. Because a lot of more than 90% of NFTs that were produced in the 2022 or something did not have this real value. You found it. So and that is really good. It's a really interesting thing. So and the final question we usually like to speak with our guests about is, what do they do with their money? Where do you invest? What do you buy? Stocks, bonds, or NFTs?
Bitcoin. As my declaration for the last 14 years is one of the most read declarations in the country. A lot of people follow what I do. I'm very real estate heavy. which I don't like. That comes from the past. I have a lot of real estate. I have cars, so that's also not good. I have stock also, I also have NFTs. But as you said, that is not the biggest success in the last years, apart from Planies. I like the capital markets, and I invest in different asset classes. I think I'm an educated investor with the income I have, and I'm never closed to what is developing. I'm very interested in the Web3 developments, in the blockchain technology. So this is a field where I really see a future. Whatever is digital, I'm a big fan of it. If you ask me what would I do today, can I swap some of the real estate into stock and especially into AI technologies, Tesla, all of this stuff, I would do. But you know, when you have good real estate, and I think I have good real estate, then you keep that because it's also a good investment. So I'm not giving investment advice, but I'm very diversified, I would say, and I'm very more conservative, but I'm very open to future kind of investments. What is possible there. But the problem with my investments, that the nation takes part in whatever I do in my declaration, and to a limited extent, but I would say too much real estate. Yeah, that's
what would be your suggestion for a person, this show audience, that just have 50 years, not cars, not 50 years.
20-year-old person watching the show, what is your, with your experience, long time?
We're not talking about thousands, not hundreds.
50 euros each month. What should they do? Where could they start, in your opinion?
I would, if you do it regular, I would start as early as you can, invest in diversified stock, global stock. I would build a portfolio of global companies, because if you invest all over the globe in companies, whatever crisis comes, companies will continue to exist and they will be driven to make profits, and these profits you benefit from when you are a shareholder. That's how the world works, the whole world. Mm-hmm. And therefore a diversified portfolio with stock around the world, and I would, and I recommend this to my kids, to invest with 50 euros per month. Best is an ETF, which is then covering global stock. If you are very young, you can go for a higher risk ETF, and if you are already a bit older, but you still want to do this, you go for more conservative. Because I think it's nothing wrong to invest into global growth, because companies, if they don't perform, the shareholders will fire the management, find new management, and then will go back to growth. And that is how the world has functioned in the last 100 years. And I think as a world, we will function also in this. When you have then a portfolio, then normally you're into wealth management, even if it's only like 10,000 or 20,000, you have savings. And then professionals will tell you should diversify, right? Mm-hmm. You should not have it all in one. But if you start as a young person, you have 50 euros a month. If you think about investing, then I think that is already very smart. Because you have in your work life 40, 50 years. If you do this every month, you can work out what comes out. If you look at past performance of global companies and you really do it for 50 years, you will have a much better position than many people today have who did not know about that knowledge. And I think your program is really helping to educate the market on that.
We are trying. Thank you. Okay, so with that I will say thank you to Mārtiņš Gauss. Paldies Konstantīnam, un skatītājiem es atgādināšu, ka, ja jums ir kādi jautājumi, sūtiet uz Nākotnes kapitāls @Delfi.lv, meklējiet mūsu visos sociālajos tīklos un, protams, arī Delfi.lv. Paldies. Thank you, Mārtiņ.
Paldies.
Visu labu.
Paldies. Visu labu.